Yeah.
And one of my points about it was like the best of 1940s and 50s film noir is so much better than Chinatown.
Yeah.
You've seen The Third Man and Touch of Evil, which is kind of two gems of this particular genre. Do you think my theory holds any water?
I mean, yeah, I like Chinatown a lot more than you do. But I think you make a good point. I mean, Chinatown is clearly like paying homage to those films, and that can only really kind of pale somewhat in comparison to the originals themselves. But
I have no problem with what Chinatown is doing. I'm just saying what it does film noir so much less interesting than the best of film noir. Especially with Wells' behind the camera.
Well, of course, film noir is also, I think, just empirically better in black and white, and that's just kind of a...
Yes, yeah, it is kind of part of its identity.
But anyway, this is the Hack Fraud Show. This is Orson Welles week, which will hopefully go down much easier than Spielberg week did.
I am so shocked that was as combative as it was. I was like, Spielberg, yeah, we all agree on him. It's like, oh no, we fought over E.T. of all movies.
Well, I just uploaded that episode. Did you read my description? I was like, the guys discuss Spielberg by arguing about Catch Me If You Can, arguing about E.T., and then kind of agreeing on Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
I forgot how angry I got about those outtakes. Like, I forgot it. But let's talk about some Orson Welles.
Alrighty. So this week we watched two films by that I can't even think of a word to describe him. What?
That ill-known filmmaker.
Yeah, sure. Orson Welles, director of Citizen Kane, commonly considered the greatest film ever made. We did not watch Citizen Kane for this, but we did watch 1957's Touch of Evil and 1970...
3, is it?
It's either 3 or 5, I'm not sure, but regardless... F for Fake. Which is a very interesting movie, and I'm eager to talk about that with you guys.
I know, here's the thing about it, Wells is one of the very few film figures that transcends film. Like, there's this famous, he was in the Federal Theater in the 30s, doing Voodoo Macbeth and all that. There was the famous War of the Worlds broadcast,
yes,
which is brought up in F for Fake, which is great.
Yes.
And so like if you take a history class, there's a good chance you might hear about Wells. You can't really say about most film figures.
That's a good point. No, Wells was kind of an impresario from a young age. Yes, he got his start in theater. He had the War of the Worlds broadcast, which gained him enough notoriety to land a motion picture deal.
The greatest motion picture deal that had ever been seen.
Pretty much, he had Final Cut right away, didn't he?
He had almost complete creative control.
Well, it's the well-known tragic history of Wells that he made perhaps his greatest film when he was 25. He never had such creative freedom again. He spent his entire life basically fighting to get his movies made and to get his vision on screen, and by the end of it, he was fat, drunk, and pretty much broke, I think, right?
Yeah, practically. He was Orson Welles. He could get money if he needed it, but he never really, even after Kane, he never really found success.
Yeah.
At that point, he kind of faded away into a cult status.
Well, Kane only gained its really acclaim years later. He did win the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay, but Kane was it didn't do well at the box office, and the critics kind of shrugged it off. Years later, I think the French, the Cahiers du Cinema was kind of instrumental in bringing it back to critical attention.
That book you got me for Christmas, Me and Orson.
Oh yes.
That has a little forward. That was this big trajectory of Wells' career, and sort of how he was kind of brought back by the French New Wave.
Yeah.
Because he shares an awful lot in common with the French New Wave. He's kind of the original auteur.
Yeah.
and all that. Like Wells is kind of one of the only figures that he would break rules before there's rules even were in place.
Yeah,
and like it's at his best, he seemed like he'd just be casually breaking rules as he goes,
right,
and creating new definitions of cinema.
I think Citizen Kane especially is interesting because, like, you look at it now, I'm sure it looks less extraordinary now than it did in the 40s when it came out, but it's still pretty damn incredible. Like, the story is great, the acting is great, but even the filmmaking, which was like radical for the time, much less so now just because it's been so influential, but it's still, the cinematography in Kane is incredible. It's gorgeous.
Like,
it's just
its deep focus is still impressive.
Yeah.
We don't. They didn't make movies like that back then. We still really don't make movies like Kane.
Yeah.
It's kind of this. It's like Wells at his best. Like it's kind of like what we were talking about with Spielberg. Is like movies that both are extremely influential and extremely well known, but also are still really unique and really fun to watch again.
Yeah. I think I've seen Citizen Kane like 4 times now, and I appreciate it every time I see it.
Oh yeah, it's one of those few films that only gets better the more you watch it.
Yeah. But we're not here to talk about Citizen Kane, so let's...
We'll definitely get back to it, of course. It's kind of hard not to with Wells.
Yeah, that's true. But let's jump to... what do we want to talk about first?
I think... I kind of want to talk about F for Fake.
All right, let's do it. I'm really curious to see what you guys have to say about this.
Mm-hmm. Reed, let's start with you. I'm kind of curious what you think about.
Okay, to be honest, I only remember the beginning, and I only remember the end. I'm a little fuzzy in the middle, and I don't know why.
Well, I think maybe that comes down to like it's weird. This is weird to say about documentary, but it's breakneck editing. He's constantly flipping between time periods and stories and things like that.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah.
So like I can't say I blame you.
Although I do like the documentary feel. It feels a lot like a documentary, and even the beginning is marvelous when Orson Welles is doing magic.
Yeah, that's
and he's breaking the fourth wall, and then as the story progresses, he is part of the story as he narrates.
Well,
yeah, Fake. It's technically kind of this Wells visual essay.
Yeah.
On like art fraud and fraud itself.
I believe the Criterion Collection's official summary calls it a free-form sort of documentary and an inspired prank.
But yeah, that seemed like sometimes it'll just cut to Wells and he's just waxing poetic about a cathedral,
yeah.
Or he's doing magic tricks in the very beginning, or there's this whole Picasso bit, which is all just rich Wellesian storytelling, and they just say, "Yeah, we thought you thought we were telling the truth, huh?" And like it even begins like it's almost, there's something strikingly modern about this movie. Like there's something strikingly modern about having a little written statement saying everything you are about to see is true for the next hour. Like there's something shockingly modern.
This may be, honestly, if I think about it, this might be one of the first postmodern films. Interestingly, because it's not. I wouldn't call it a mockumentary exactly because, well, here's what I understand is that like, this guy Francois, who you see in the film, had been making this documentary about this art forger. What's his name?
Elmire.
Elmire, yeah.
Elmire.
He had been making this documentary about Elmire, and then Clifford Irving, yes, got involved also. And so it kind of evolved into this larger look at kind of fakery, and then he gave the footage to Wells to work on, I think, and then Wells just decided to turn it into something just completely, well, not completely different, but it's something much more elaborate.
It turned into Wells' movie more than above all else.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
But, like, you start with this basic document, well, you don't start with it, like, in the movie, but you have a lot of kind of basic documentary footage of like interviews with Elmire and of him painting and what have you. But Wells just edits it in such a way that it's all kind of broken up and like free flowing, like almost as if, I'm sure it's supposed to feel this way, like it's just kind of a stream of consciousness kind of Welles just musing on these themes of like fakery and artistry.
Yeah. All very intelligently and creatively.
Yeah.
I know. To me, the one thing that comes to mind, like those stunt TV shows where they have like Gordon Ramsay visits America or stuff like that.
Sure.
This is kind of like Orson Welles goes to Ibiza, or Orson Welles meets or art forgers. There's something almost like vloggy about it at times.
Yeah. It feels almost like a Vlog Brothers episode, which is terrible to say, but it feels like it.
I don't know. Welles is far more politically incorrect. He does say, like, I've never met a Hungarian who isn't a charlatan.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because Welles is such kind of just kind of a figure of such kind of debauchery and I don't really know what I'm saying here, but like Welles makes such an interesting and compelling figure to kind of place at the center of this. Like him playing himself is very entertaining and very just kind of compelling to watch.
Well, I think this is something I noticed while watching. Is like all the filmmakers we've done before, they are filmmakers first.
Yeah.
Welles is an entertainer.
Well,
he really doesn't.
Other than Chaplin,
Welles is
maybe.
An entertainer. He's a magician. He's constantly like throwing baubles in front of the audience. He's constantly doing all these weird things. Trying to you've heard of the Cockatoo story from Kane. Like in Kane, there was a jump scare in Cockatoo.
Oh yes.
And that's like, why did you put it in? They'd be asleep by that. And there's some kind of like there's this idea that Welles is both really wants to entertain, but also kind of doesn't trust his audience to stay engaged unless he does all these crazy things. And F for Fake seems to be the purest distillation of that.
Yeah.
Especially towards the end, where after the hour's up, he's like, "I have lied to you."
Well,
he just goes into debauched sensationalism for 30 minutes almost.
Well, that whole Picasso story, he tells this story about Oya Kodar and her grandfather and their relationship with Picasso, and it's a very kind of
male gaze.
It's a very kind of scandalous story, and then when he gets to the end, he's like, "Oops, I fooled you." For the past 10 minutes, I've been lying my head off.
You only telling the truth for the next hour.
Right, exactly. Because toward the beginning of the film, there's a title card that says, like, for the next hour, everything you see will be based on fact. That hour elapses, and then Welles just gets to go.
Yeah, he just goes nuts.
Yeah. But, I mean,
it's all wildly entertaining.
It is. This is a fascinating movie, just because the story of Elmire is extremely interesting on its own, and Clifford Irving as well, who wrote a biography of Elmire and then wrote a fake sensationalized biography of Howard Hughes that was then exposed.
Yes.
And
fraud.
Right.
It's all that wonderful layered stuff.
Yes. So all that material is extremely interesting on its own. It's fascinating to hear the stories about how Elmire paints these Picassos, and then they muse about like what are experts really, and how experts examined his artwork and pronounced it absolutely genuine, and they muse
pretty
like
direct dig at film critics as well.
That is true.
I think there's like an interview somewhere somebody asked, well, like, what do you think of critics? Aren't they experts? And it's like, well, you can't get rid of the experts no matter what you do, so film critics are here to stay.
Yeah. I'm kind of struggling to come up with things to say about this movie, but it really is fascinating and very, very entertaining.
As far as what themes it's trying to portray, like fraud, most of all like fraud through art forgery, and also through like Welles discussing is like his beginnings and how he just lied his tits off to get his start. And like there's this idea of like what is like there's also one of my favorite themes of what's in a name. Like people are constantly changing their names and lying about themselves. And so forth. And like there's like even like the sensationalist story at the end where the fake grandfather says like I have no name, but my legacy can live off through these fakes in all these different galleries across the world. And like, there's the themes of this movie are fascinating. How Wells portrays them and how Wells stitches them together is really string of consciousness, really modern, really fascinating as well.
Yeah, I love the way he does this thing where like he cuts, he juxtaposes the documentary footage so that it looks like people who like interviews that were filmed at completely different times. The people in those interviews seem to be conversing.
Yes, I noticed that. Like halfway through. Yeah, that's wonderful. Also, this is also a film where it would just cut to Wells at the editing table,
right?
So like, oh, here, let me find this.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Which is just wonderful, and
right.
Just how I can't quite explain just how ahead of its time this thing is.
Well, that's what I mean when I talk about postmodernism, because like it seems to just like flout the idea of genre. Like it's ostensibly a documentary, but it plays with all kinds of different conventions, and it acknowledges like the nature of the medium, because as you say, like it shows Wells editing, and it frequently cuts to like the editing machine, like in the film running through it. Like you see, I think the documentary footage playing on the screen of the editing machine at some points.
It's a puppet show where you constantly see the puppeteer.
Yes.
And like, if anything, like seeing the puppeteer is part of the focus.
Absolutely.
Part of the draw.
Because like, I think it kind of, here's the other thing I think, it really plays with like, because, documentaries are supposed to have some sort of like, an element of, at least of journalistic integrity.
They are like, they are journalism film.
Yeah.
And at least in most of the time.
Yeah. And Wells kind of plays with this idea of like, that we inherently trust documentarians to present the facts and to present, things that we are supposed to believe and the truth, and he just manipulates those expectations and those beliefs in such a marvelous way.
Yeah, it's such a. It's also it's like Wells is just so wonderful to watch. you can't like anytime Wells is on screen in anything, he is just such a wonderful presence. There's just something magnetism. There's a magnetism that can't quite be explained. So, do we have anything else really add to F for Fake?
I don't know.
What you've been kind of quiet, Reed. What is your
my consensus on it?
Hey, what's your senses on? Like, do you agree that it's as like raucously entertaining as we think it is?
Okay, I feel like I should come clean. I did watch it last night, except for whatever reason, I think I fell asleep through the whole middle of it, and then woke up. I'm like, oh shit, middle of it, and I didn't have time. And like I thought, didn't have time to rewatch it because I watched the other movie.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, at least you got to see the Kodar bits.
Yes.
At least you got to see Wells engaging in just debauched sensationalism.
Yes. Yeah. It is very stylized in its cinematography. It's very loosey-goosey when it comes to story.
I think the postmodern nature of it is just really unique, and even within that runs, like, we still really don't make movies like this anymore. I don't think anyone's made anything like that.
Yeah, I don't really. I think this is a movie truly unique of its own, and there's this whole rule where any work of art will copy off that work of art after so many years, and I think for forever, I don't think that's caught up.
Well, it just never. Well, F for Fake never really got much popular grasp. So no one was copying it because no one really saw it. Like, it's kind of like, because it's a part of the Wells filmography, which is more recently kind of come back, and people are discovering all this stuff. So, F for Fake is coming back, but it's very slowly. It's still rather ill-seen.
That is true. I don't know that many people have heard of it. It's certainly, I don't know if it's a movie that would have really mainstream appeal necessarily.
I think it's entertaining enough to be shown to anyone, but for people to really appreciate it, I think you'd have to have a sort of film background to truly see what it's doing. But anyway, I highly fucking recommend F for Fake. I think it's maybe Wells' second best movie.
Really interesting.
I really love this one. Granted, let's open the next bit with a revelation. I'm not quite as sold on Touch of Evil as most people.
Really?
Really?
No, let me put this. I adore Touch of Evil. Let's put that right up front. But, like, some people call it Welles' best. Not everyone. Like, people mostly gravitate towards Kane, but oftentimes people put Touch of Evil right up there with some of his best, and I'm not quite as comfortable doing that. Especially considering, like, there's, like, some upfront problems with it, like, Charlton Heston as a Mexican.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of the elephant in the room with this movie.
That's the elephant. That's something I just want to get out of the way. Like, yeah, Charlton Heston's in brownface. Yes, it's really obvious.
Yeah.
But it's something like, if you can get over that, and I think it's something you can.
Well, you just have to recognize that the movie is kind of a product of its time. And then, of course, this is something that Hollywood is still struggling with, and that's
in its own
notable.
unique way.
Yeah.
Welles is progressive, but he's not transcendent. I think that's something to come up front with. But yeah, Touch of Evil is often considered one of the greatest film noir. Some consider it the last film noir, especially it's coming right at the tail end of that period.
Yeah. And
it concerns a sort of a border on the Mexican-American border town.
Which is very strange to watch in today's climate, when people can just kind of walk across the border from Mexico and America. It's very strange.
Yeah, that is strange. And there's like this sensational scene at the beginning where someone puts a bomb in the trunk of a car, and it goes off on the American side of the border. And then that just tumbleweeds into this big conspiracy concerning a worker, Charlton Heston, who works for the Mexican government, and a corrupt cop on the American side played by Orson Welles. And there's all sorts of Mexican gangsters and drug cartels and Orson Welles hamming it up.
I'm not really used to fat Orson Welles without his beard, though. That's kind of...
That is
the only
thing to say.
I was a little icky about.
That is a strange thing. Fat Welles is beardless. Which is like...
Not stubbleless, though.
No, not stubble, no. Welles kind of plays, was it the Hank Quinlan?
Quinlan, I think.
Quinlan. It's something, he starts off as almost a caricature of a corrupt cop. But then as the movie goes on, they reveal more and more layers about him. And to a point where, like, he is, even though he's not the protagonist, he is the centerpiece of the movie.
That is true.
His actions and his character beats are what drives the movie.
Well, I think it's interesting because a lot of actor-directors, I think, tend to cast themselves in very kind of vain roles, like usually kind of as the handsome lead of the story, even if they're not quite... Yeah, I mean, I always think of Woody Allen casting himself in roles where he gets to have love scenes with beautiful women all the time, but... yeah, but...
or even, I think one thing I'm thinking is, I don't know why this kid was Tommy Wiseau in The Room.
Yeah. That's a
good
point.
Example.
But Welles, doesn't really have any illusions about himself. He casts himself as a fat, drunk, gone-to-seed, corrupt cop, and
constantly munching on candy bars.
While it is a very big part, I wouldn't call it a vain part, necessarily.
No, like, Welles, I don't know, to me it's like, later Welles, the parts he plays in his movies are like in The Trial, he's bedridden for a lot of that role. It's like, there's a sense of I don't want to lose weight, I'll play the fat one. But yeah, it's also like it's one of his which is weird to say, because Welles is already kind of over the top, but this is even hammy, even for Welles.
I mean, I think one of his first scenes when he had the candy bar, and he kind of held the leg, I kind of expected him to just take out and say, mash,
This is a very over-the-top movie. I think that's something to put out of the way, but not...
Yeah.
Not over the top, not in a pejorative.
No, it's not in an off-putting way either. It's...
I mean, it gets over the top nature as part of the draw. There's something sort of enthralling about just how melodramatic it can be, just how vague it can be.
Right. Well, film noir is something that I'm very interested in. I really enjoy seeing neo-noirs. I think a lot of very excellent neo-noirs have come out. I love... well, now I can't think of one, but...
Chinatown.
Yeah, but, the elements of...
Kiss Kiss Bang Bang Bang, which is
that's true.
a prestige of one.
Right. I just love the influence of noir is all over popular culture now. Movies, TV, pretty much everything. Even Breaking Bad has moments of neo-noir in it. And, to see an original, a genuine film noir is really always a very entertaining experience for me.
Yeah.
This movie, I quite enjoyed it. The plot is a little kind of hard to follow at times, I think, just because Wells, I think doesn't like to waste time just kind of slowing down to explain things, and he kind of trusts you to just, keep up with everything as fast as he's going, which isn't a problem.
Which is weird for what he did towards the end towards the gag he made, as we talked about earlier in Citizen Kane.
I don't know, there's something kind of strange about, the pacing. Sometimes it's just, he just kind of trusts you to get it as he goes. But other times, there's this scene where, they show a shoebox on, a bench, and, Charlton Heston accidentally knocks it over, and he puts it back up. And then later, it shows, Quinlan has put dynamite in that box to frame the man who lives there. And sometimes he'll do stuff like that, but other times it's just, he'll just cut. He keeps editing between different moments. There are moments where it seems like action is really ramping up, and he'll cut away.
Yeah.
That happens often during the movie. No, granted, but he doesn't cut away in a way that undercuts that tension. If anything, it's a way that kind of keeps you on edge. It's kind of a more primitive version of what he's doing in F for Fake, just cutting between all different sort of timelines, not timelines, but all sort of different stories and plots.
Well, I don't know if I would put this right up there with Kane either. Kane is definitely, just a perfectly constructed movie, and this is not that. I really like it. But it's definitely less perfectly constructed than Kane. It's not quite as tight, and it's
rough around the edges.
Yeah, and it's not quite as technically innovative. I'm not knocking the cinematography at all. It's brilliant. This is a great looking movie.
This movie's fucking gorgeous.
I really love his use of kind of crane shots where he'll just kind of start on the level and then the shot will just rise until you're overlooking everybody. That's all great. But
so one thing I was at the lighting.
Yeah.
The lighting is just wonderful. It'll just be a single light source, and people have shadows on each other and so forth. And there's wonderful compositions.
It was very how you would call Spielberg-esque.
Well, Janusz Kaminski, maybe.
Well, so many filmmakers have been influenced by Wells. It's his influence is very apparent, especially when you go back and see his work. But I don't know this. I really enjoyed this movie. It's a lot of fun. It's got a very engaging storyline, I think, even if it can be a little hard to follow at times. But I don't know. Had a somewhat happier ending than I was expecting.
That is true.
I mean, it's not a happy ending, but Charlton Heston, gets his wife back, and they just kind of they are back together, and the bad guys have been defeated more or less, but
dead.
Watching it again, I realized just how much of this movie revolves around the Wells character, and and they give him he is a fairly complex character. They give him how his wife was strangled, and how there's also this plot how he manipulates people around him.
Right.
He manipulates one of Uncle Joe, one of the Mexican bosses, and like he manipulates all the cops around him, and all the cops have only wonderful things to say about the Welles character and what he does, even though it's clear to us that what he does is horrible.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's also this idea that he himself doesn't. He makes no moral distinction between actually finding evidence and just planting people he thinks guilty.
Well, they point this out, like,
I find that fascinating.
They talk a lot in the movie about his, like, quote unquote intuition, and later on at the kind of the climax, he's talking and he's like, they're like, how many people did you frame? And he's like, no one that wasn't guilty. And then the twist is that it reveals, like, the Mexican boy that he framed for the murder confessed to the crime.
Yes.
Now whether he confessed just to get out of a tougher sentence, or whether he actually did it, I guess is kind of left ambiguous. But
that's what I really like about this movie. Like it knows when to shop and just let's. It knows to leave characters ambiguous.
But I think it's interesting. And then the guy who points that out, he was like, "Well, his intuition was right after all." And it's kind of funny to see that. And like, this man is just abhorrent, but maybe he's right.
And also, like, one thing I want to say, like, one scene really sticks out to me, and it's the scene where the Welles character kills Uncle Joe. And to me, that is shot and edited in a way that is strikingly modern.
Oh yes, definitely.
And there's something very it's not really that violent, but it's very visceral. Like he's reaching through he's climbing up and trying to break through glass, and he whips him down.
And even some kind of shaky cam in there, even.
Yeah, there's something like it, and there's just something so striking about that, and that's one thing I remember. Like the ending of this movie, I think is just a rush, and how he films it, and how he cuts between things, how the lighting especially so.
Yeah.
And also the score.
Oh yeah, it's the Henry Mancini score.
Yes.
Oh, Henry Mancini wrote this score? Oh, that's interesting.
He did the score. Oh. I stole it for a movie.
You did.
I did steal it. I hope people would have recognized it, but you didn't.
Yeah. But, I think it's... Welles was a very good actor, but I think he's the kind of the rare actor-director who's a better filmmaker than he is an actor, maybe.
I don't know. Well, Welles is sort of like,
maybe that's not so rare,
Welles
actually.
Welles is always playing some version of himself. Like there's some things like the corrupt cop says are like, no, that's just Welles.
Yeah. Actually, let me rephrase that a bit. He's maybe the only one who's as brilliant a filmmaker as he is an actor. Although I do think his filmmaking is just a towering aspect of him. And of the movies. Like, the performances in his movies are great, but the filmmaking just kind of stands as just this monolith of innovation and creativity that I don't know that any other director has reached that level.
It stands out. It definitely stands out more of the performances. Mostly, because I remember the filmmaking more than that.
Well, yeah, like, Welles is very show-offy director, and that's fun. Welles is the kind of director who he casually innovates, almost like at his best.
Well, I was going to say, like, Welles was one of the earliest directors, I think, who was not afraid to show off and to be you kind of call the audience's attention to the filmmaking.
Yeah, like he kind of I don't think he popularizes, but he's like one of the first to really jump onto sense of camera. Like you notice the camera moving, like in the camera in a Welles movie. Moves in a very particular way. Like it's quick movement. It's like you always notice it moving. It's not like other movies where they try to like Hitchcock would try to hide it, but here you really notice that, and it's really striking for what he goes for.
Sure.
But is Welles the greatest filmmaker? I know he doesn't have quite as many movies as others we put in this kind of category.
I don't know, because it's interesting because, it would be interesting to see, what Welles could have done if he'd had, studio backing, if the studio had not interfered with him so often. Like, there's three versions of Touch of Evil because the studio cut it down against his wishes and then efforts were later made to restore it. It's often hard to, like, really kind of find the definitive version of Welles movies just because they were cut all to hell at times. The Magnificent Ambersons still has not really been properly restored. I don't know if it's even possible to do so.
There's one, I can't remember quite what it's called, but like there's one movie where the Criterion Collection released for it is just like all the cuts. Like there's no definitive versions, they just released all of them. And I can't, what is that movie named? Immortal? No. Here,
the Immortal, was it The Immortal Story?
That might be another one, but I don't think that's what I'm thinking of.
Okay, well, whatever.
We'll get to it later.
I don't know. Wells's lesser known work. I think Welles has really enjoyed kind of a revival in recent years. Like people are really realizing just how brilliant even his lesser known movies were. Like everyone pretty much agrees on the greatness of Citizen Kane. Touch of Evil is fairly well known, if not quite so much.
It's getting a revival. A lot of people see it too.
But even stuff like Chimes at Midnight and F for Fake and all this stuff is being recognized as this is brilliant filmmaking.
Achievements they are.
Yeah, even The Trial, which I am on record as not really caring for, but I'm surprised Criterion hasn't put out The Trial yet.
That's right. They're putting out. They just put out a Welles movie this year.
They're putting out Chimes at Midnight and The Immortal Story this year, so I'm sure they'll get around to it. I hope they get around to doing Touch of Evil as well, because I think a restoration of that is about due.
Yeah, that'd be nice just to see. I don't know what version y'all saw, but the one I got my hands on was kind of lower quality.
Yeah, mine was as well.
Concerned.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's kind of the see in full.
I think we have the same one, the same version, John.
I assume. Well, you guys, did yours guys have the little title card at the beginning, like this has been re-edited?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Based on his 58-page memo.
Yeah, the 58-page memo.
I don't know. See, as far as whether Welles is like the greatest filmmaker, it all goes back to the old divide of do you think greatness should be placed on like those who did something first or those who took that thing and built on it and made it maybe even better.
You described it as Birth of a Nation versus The Godfather.
Yeah. Like, do you want to choose the...
Or why can't it be both? Why can't it be both?
Well, there's no reason it can't be both, but if you're picking the number one, Reed, you kind of have to make a choice.
I tend to lean on, like, here's the thing about it, Welles is kind of unique even within his field, like, because Hitchcock is another filmmaker of roughly the same era, who also was very innovative and set the stage for film to come. But one of the key differences, Hitchcock was about setting rules. He was about he wrote books concerning like how to build suspense and all these things. Welles was about breaking all those, breaking rules. And I think it's sort of like I guess it comes down like, what do you admire more? Do you admire those who took risk and broke rules, or do you admire those who established those rules?
Yeah. I don't think that's a question that's easily answered, and maybe even should have a single answer. Right, exactly. But hey, no, Welles is great, Welles is brilliant, and I don't think anyone can argue with that. It's a shame he went as far to seed as he did, but...
Yeah, but well, at least we got that wonderful wine commercial.
Yeah, I was going to say even his drunken wine commercials and his frozen pea voiceovers are wildly entertaining.
It's a lot of shit, don't you? Welles is an enigma.
Yes.
More than anything else, and we love him.
Just one other thing, John. I know that Welles is kind of your favorite filmmaker and maybe the biggest influence on you. Do you know why that happened? You don't have to. I'm just curious.
Why that happened? I think it was it Kane. I think it came out. I watched Kane, and I was just so blown away by it, and just so blown away by Welles as a performer and a filmmaker. And it was one of the first. Watching Kane was one of those experiences where I noticed the filmmaking itself. Like, I noticed the camera movement. I noticed all the things he's doing.
Okay.
And I found that, like, really enthralling and really breathtaking. I don't know if this is actually what happened. I often bullshit my film origins all the time. But I do like. I think part of it also was like getting into Welles, like the interviews online and like getting in his other movies. Like Welles is such an interesting person, not just a filmmaker. And I combined with how much I adore his movies and the personality of Welles, I really gravitated towards that more than any other filmmaker. So maybe it was an accident, maybe it was on purpose. I'm not quite sure. I bullshit all the time. We are hack frauds, by the way.
Indeed.
Yes.
Well, so that's Wells Week. This was a rather short episode. We've gotten used to covering 3 movies at breakneck speed, so I think...
I think this was a good episode. I think we got a lot of interesting things in it.
Yeah. It was good. It was just short. But no matter.
Maybe for the best.
Yeah. So, what's up for next week? You mentioned a lot of Hitchcock. I would suggest Hitchcock, although there's so much Hitchcock stuff I want to watch. I'm loath to choose 2.
Do we go with the big stuff? Well, here's the thing. I think I'm watching Rear Window pretty soon for a film class. So I think Rear Window might be one we want to do. Do we want to talk about Vertigo?
I'd like to see Vertigo again, just to kind of reorient myself with it. Because I saw it once, didn't love it. But I feel like I should see it again because I didn't pay super close attention, maybe as close attention as I should have.
From what I think I've watched like two or 3 Hitchcock movies. I've seen Notorious, Vertigo, and 39 Steps.
I think Vertigo and Psycho are the only 2 that I've seen.
I haven't seen Psycho. Do you think we should do that?
I've seen Psycho so many times, but if you haven't seen it, this is difficult.
I haven't seen it either, so.
I know. I've always been mostly cold towards Hitchcock. I'm never going to tear down the man who built so many rules of modern cinema, but I've never really gravitated towards him as a filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe we can see why and look at that. So I think Vertigo would be an interesting one to look at. I want to do Vertigo.
Okay.
At least maybe just to go into maybe at least to answer my own question: am I wrong? And then so what else? I think Rear Window would be another one to look at because that's another one they consider one of Hitchcock's greatest.
Yeah.
So are we doing Rear Window and Vertigo, I guess?
I guess so. There's just a wealth of Hitchcock stuff and so much that I haven't seen. I kind of wanted to do North by Northwest. North by Northwest is long, though.
Do we just want to put a to be determined by Hitchcock for now?
Well, when else are we gonna figure these out?
I so let's set Rear Window and I don't know. We could do North by North. I don't know. Vertigo just seems to be the one. Like that's the one.
No, let's do Vertigo. Vertigo is like the one that everybody like kind of puts at the top. So
some people put it like it's what it beat Kane a couple of years ago for best movie of all time on the AFI list.
Bizarrely,
it's been quickly replaced, but.
Okay, so we'll do Vertigo and Rear Window's fine. I haven't seen that, so let's do that.
That's a pretty popular one too. So.
All right.
We will see if our Hitchcock apathy will be rectified.
Hooray! Somehow I managed to cut a total of 18 minutes out of that recording.
I'm not surprised at all. I was thinking like shit. He's going to be able to cut like 20 minutes of this shit.
Can you give me 1 second? I think someone might be at my door.
Really, because it's very postmodern.
We shall wait for Mr. Aquilino to answer his door. You do you, Reed. You do you.
Okay, well...